Welcome to Beyond the Boardroom, the podcast for leaders, change makers, and purpose-driven souls who believe business can be both powerful and human. I'm your host, Jen Demiri, founder of JD Consulting, culture shaper, connection creator, and champion for authentic, connected leadership. Here we go deeper than metrics and meetings. We explore the real stories, raw moments, and bold ideas that shape how we lead and who we become in the process. From workplace culture to conscious strategy, from self-leadership to systems that truly serve, this is where heart meets business. So grab a coffee, take a breath, and join me as we go beyond the boardroom. Welcome back to Beyond the Boardroom, leading with purpose and connection. Today, I'm truly honored to be joined by Amy Gildea, graduate from the Australian Institute of Company Directors and an internationally recognized leader who is transforming what power and leadership mean in the 21st century. Amy's career has spanned more than 2 decades at the front lines of diplomacy, humanitarian response, and international development. As former managing director of Tetra Tech International Development, she led 560 staff across 33 countries and stewarded a $1 billion portfolio through financial and cultural turnaround, organizational transformation, and sustainable growth. From rebuilding systems shattered by genocide to shaping digital health reforms to serving on the ground with Doctors Without Borders, Amy has led through crises, market disruption, and some of the toughest environment in the world. What makes her leadership so distinctive is the way she holds the tension between purpose and profit. Amy proves that commercial success and values can coexist as engines of transformation, and her power reframed vision challenges us all to rethink what true strength looks like in today's world. In this conversation, we'll explore onboarding, connection, culture, and leadership in times of disruption. We'll talk about what it really takes to lead authentically in moments of uncertainty and why the foundation of good leadership always begins with managing yourself first. Your health, your mindset, your growth, and your awareness before you can lead others. Amy's message is both simple and urgent. If we want to lead well, we must first learn to sit with ourselves, manage our own change, and lead from a place of connection. This is going to be a conversation about courage, clarity, and the future of leadership, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for the invitation to be part of the conversation today. It's really exciting.
I'm, as I said, really honored to have you here, and I would really like to dive in straight away. So I'm wondering, you've led through everything from humanitarian crisis to billion-dollar transformations. Looking back, what moment most shaped how you understand leadership?
Yes, there has definitely been a key vaulter in my leadership journey last year when I studied at the Pacifica Communities University and their Pacifica Philosophies course. And for me, what that did was bring together in a really coherent way what I had observed and experienced and learned along the 2 decades of work in the humanitarian and development sector, where I could see joy and suffering sitting alongside each other. And what that did was really coalesce it into this understanding and this movement, particularly as a female leader, away from a servant-based leadership style to what I term a sovereign-based leadership style. And by that, I mean, as women, what I've observed, high-performing female leaders, high-performing women, we've been conditioned socially to people please. And part of our leadership style is to really often lean deeply into this empathy and compassion, which is all wonderful and much needed. However, when it happens at the expense of our own health and well-being and boundaries, I see the weight of what women carry both at home and in the workplace, and can put you on this really unhealthy trajectory where you're carrying so much stress and weight. And moving into that place of sovereignty where you're looking out for your own boundaries, as well as looking to ensure the dignity and manner of the collective is still held, I feel is the next evolution of that, and is a really positive space to be in. And in terms of the practice that underpins sovereign leadership, from the philosophical course that I did in Fiji last year, what really resonated with me and that I've been integrating into my leadership style is these 5 principles. And the first was what they term in Samoa as itulangi. And itulangi is my view of heaven. And being able to hold multiple itulangi, so to be curious about your side of heaven and your perspective, to hold that curiosity, to explore it, understand it, and then bring the 2 worldviews together in what Dan George is a reconciliation practitioner or consultant that I follow. He calls 2-eyed seeing. And it is about being able to sit in these 2 or multiple different worlds to understand. And so really channeling that element of curiosity. Okay, we all have very firm views. Sometimes we've grown up socially with all of the different education and social, cultural, linguistic nuances and exposures that we've had. How do we really bring that curiosity to understand deeply someone else's worldview? And in that, be able to hold what the second principle calls mutual contradiction. And so understanding that things can coexist, conflict exists, and not to run away from that, but to look at how we hold those contradictions. So purpose and profit being a beautiful example of what traditionally in business we think of as polar opposites, but actually when we can hold them together in equanimity or balance, we see that they can coexist and that they don't have to be mutually exclusive. And so from that process, we enter into what the third principle is around mutual emergence, which is that mutual growth pathway where we both learn, where we both evolve, where we both shift, which is where I see some of the most powerful change, both in terms of internally within organisations, but also shifting the systems, the broader systems within which we operate as society, as nations, governments, which is really exciting. That's the exciting transformation that, especially in the humanitarian and development sector, we're really hoping to achieve. And the flip side of that, or the other piece, or the fourth principle, is about restraint. And so it is sort of that element of push and pull. And in leadership, as I believe in life, that level of emotional regulation to understand sometimes when to hold back, when to exercise restraint. Part of that's reading the room. Is it the right time? Is it the right place to say something? Am I the right person to say it? Does it need to be said in this way? All of that sort of intentionality around our behaviours and communication is what's sort of encompassed by that element of restraint. And then finally, the fifth, which I think is the most powerful, and this leads to sort of what you were talking about in your introduction around relationality and connection, is the Hawaiian term aloha. And a lot of us know it as a simple greeting of hello. It's a bit like the term namaste, where yes, there's a functionality around it in terms of a greeting, and there's a much deeper meaning to it. And aloha is around that thread of existence that connects us all. And so I've been on this journey for the last 12 months with various different mentors and collaborators where we talk about aloha, and we talk about it particularly in the development setting, in restoring the colonial narrative of development, but also from a leadership and a business perspective, which has been very Western driven in that sort of capitalist economic framing, almost to the extreme absence of relationality and to aloha. And so we've often talked about, wouldn't it be completely disruptive to write a business strategy around aloha, around love, around connection? And what would that bring? And so we've really been testing, and I've been really testing and playing with that in the last 12 months.
Yeah, great. And this is where we finish the podcast because you no. I just love everything that you said because all of this resonates so deeply with me, what I do and how I see leadership changing in the future. I do believe the old hierarchical way of leadership is dead. It has to break down and make room for something in this way with these five principles. And um, I personally myself have looked at those five principles just in a very different way. I had never heard of them in the way you spoke about them. I've heard of them in a very different way, and um, yeah, it just brought a whole new perspective to it. Let's unpack this a little bit. So, the nuance, right? I think everything in life is nuance. There is, you know, the coin has two sides, and at the end of the day, one can't exist without the other. So we wouldn't be able to enjoy sunshine without the occasional rain, and then everything that is reliant on both sunshine and rain. And I think there's so much that we can learn from that in a leadership perspective.
Mm,
The people pleasing, where you were talking about, especially women being conditioned to people pleasing, it's like, no, no, you have to be a good girl and sit there and be quiet and look pretty, which has, dragged through generations and generations. And even men are now people pleasing so much. And I think it's not really gender related. However, yes, it's more playing out for women. I can see that as well on a regular basis. And I think there's so much unlearning that we get to
mm,
do. Um, One of my favorite things is what you were talking about, seeing like your heaven in this way and wanting to understand that how someone else sees that heaven, or their version of it. And um that's, for example, in some of my friendship or relationships, there are often situations where we have a different opinion on something, and I want to know why something, or why you're of this particular opinion. I want to dive deep. I want to know what made you develop that opinion. What are the beliefs behind it? What are the cultural settings behind this, and so on and so forth. I love having conversations with people that have an opposite opinion of me, because I actually use them as a learning opportunity rather than, you know just wanting to stick to my point of view. I want to know where your point of view is coming from. Doesn't mean I change my point of view. It just means I'm learning a new one on top of that. So maybe sometimes it changes my mind, but sometimes it doesn't. And then,
absolutely.
yeah,
And
and
I think that's where, like, if I think about the power of communication, I think for quite a number of centuries, particularly in the West, we've been, again, really conditioned to not speak about religion and politics. We're not taught how to have difficult conversations. And so to be able to sit in that space of curiosity without your own intulangi or vision feeling threatened
yeah,
is an unlearning and a learning. How do we have these really difficult conversations? And I think we can see playing out on the global stage at the moment, that sort of hopefully the last bastion of that hegemonic masculinity of fear and control and dominance, and that lack of curiosity to hold different worldviews and to explore that, and a lot of that I think takes it is also in the power of language and how we communicate. And I often find sometimes it's like this parallel world of learning where I learn so much from my children. They are huge instructors around communication, and I take that into the adult world then, or to the workplace. And some really simple examples, like one day I was driving with my daughter in the car, and she's in year one and learning all her numbers and addition and subtraction, and we were driving along, and she said, "Oh, Mum, what's 2 plus 4?" And I was like, "Wow, it's 6." And she got really angry. No, it's not. What's 2 and 4? And I was scratching my head. I'm like, it's 6. And she said it again. What's 2 plus 4? And then she started crying. And I was like, I don't understand you. I don't understand what you're asking. Can you think of a different way to ask me that question? And so she thought about it for a few minutes, went really quiet, and then she came back and said, what does it mean when there's a 2 and 4 in front of a house? And I went, oh, it's 24. And she was like, and so it's a really simple example, but it was really powerful for me in terms of how do we communicate? How do we communicate differently? How do we communicate our perspective differently so that others can understand us?
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, like I nearly hijacked everything because I got just so excited about everything that you
No,
said
not
at
at
the
all.
beginning. Because again, I'm also all about empathetic leadership and, being more emotional intelligent and all that sort of stuff. And yes, there have to be boundaries with that as well, right? So um it can go up to a certain point and then we still have to rein it back and sort of say, okay, is this still practical moving forward? So, yes, I just loved everything that you just said, and I just got so excited by it. And yeah.
No, it is exciting because within it, I feel, there's some deep ancestral wisdom in there, some deep indigenous wisdom, and I think sometimes I sit back and in the humanitarian and development sector, we have a lot of conversations around the colonial settler project, around um, language, around privilege and power. And that doesn't necessarily mean we always change the system of where the balance of that power sits at a very central level. And how do we move away from the center to the margins where often these really powerful experiences and lived experience of leadership and life and love all sit, and how do we create the space to hear that? I agree. I get so excited by it, and I'm so hopeful from what I see now as the death of empires and the rise of sovereignty.
Yeah.
But I think that's life and humanity as well, is the rise and fall of empires, and we've seen that over centuries.
Yeah. What does sovereignty mean to you?
Mm, it is such a powerful concept of agency, of self-determination, of mana. So, sort of that poise and dignity and spirit that is uh, enhancing others. So, from a leadership perspective, why I see sovereignty as so important is I see leadership as, again, a Hawaiian term, is there's an expression called kahu, and that is a protector or guardian or steward of people, place, and planet. And so that concept of sovereignty of self, but also of the collective, and holding that in balance or equanimity, I think is what sovereignty means to me. And so it's the daily practice of giving yourself grace, exercising that grace, and giving others grace, uh, and ensuring those boundaries are held strongly.
I love that. I really love that. And I will be taking some of that away for myself. For me, sovereignty has been in the past really trusting my own intuition and my gut. There was a time as a leader where I was listening more to the noise and how I should be as a leader or what I should do as a leader. And then when I did those things, they just didn't sit right with me and often didn't get the effect that was hoped for. And every time I trusted my gut and my intuition and really stood strong in, what I believed and what I felt was the right thing to do, that's when things turned out well. So in a way, I guess sovereignty, yes, is that guardianship that of self and your own belief and your own trust, and really going back to the internal rather than the external.
100%. Yes. It's being grounded in those values and that alignment, and knowing when things are not aligned, and being comfortable with the fact that you're not necessarily there for others' comfort, And that's the tremor of transformation, right? Is that things are going to become unstable and shake around you when you're trying to rebuild systems in a different way that might challenge different worldviews, um, with the intention of building them for the collective well-being.
Yeah, that's great. I really like that. So, we have spoken about reframing power a few times now already. So, from dominance to connection, I'm really curious, what does that shift mean to you personally, and how did you come to it?
So I think, for me personally, humans are so relational. We everything for us exists in relation to something else. Uh, we are wired for connection. We, I think we're seeing in the research and social commentary as Western life evolves, we're becoming more isolated, greater levels of anxiety and depression. Nuclear families are breaking down, and that broader connection to community and support networks is not there in the same way, where the village used to surround you and create abundance in different ways. And so finding that connection, and again, as high performing women, something I've also really learned over time is you have to ask for support. This hyper independence is great. It can be a bit of a trauma symptom, um, but you asking for help is mm, really hard. But then when you get a yes, it's transformative. And so, when you start to realize the power of connection, when you start to realize that, and you mentioned intuition, where you align with others from a values perspective and trust your intuition and can use your discernment to move away from those that aren't, that's where connection becomes really, really powerful. And over my working career, I think many of us have experienced that dominant model where it's one way or the highway. There is no opportunity for expression of a different pathway, where there is a fear-driven response to, and whether that's tall poppy syndrome or fearful of a broader shift in environment or a sort of dismantling of systems of power. We've all experienced those situations that are, um, but I wouldn't say they're my favourite way to work, or haven't helped me grow, isn't? But they've helped me grow. Take the good with the bad, but certainly not a place where I have thrived. And I think about it in many different experiences along my journey. And one of the most powerful that has been playing on my mind this week as I watch what's happening with the global Samud flotilla in the Med, trying to deliver aid to Gaza, and the 171 activists who were illegally detained by the Israeli military and suffered various different indignities, injuries, abuse, and torture. And I think about those models of dominance, and in my experience, having worked in Gaza, and I was sharing with a colleague last year who had worked in the West Bank. This, when we were moving through airports in Australia or the UK, you just sort of walk straight through security, get on the plane. There's security there, there's monitoring and attention, but it's all very relaxed. And we had a bit of a joke of, you turn up in Israel, having worked in Palestine, and it's a very different experience of moving through the airport, where the question is actually, well, what level of strip search will I get today? And it does sound terrible, and joking about the trauma, but it is. And some of the intense experiences where individual stands dominant over you, whilst they strip you of dignity, literally and figuratively, is a really horrific experience. And I think about how that could all evolve very differently from a place where we are wired to connect. And if I think about it from a neuroplasticity perspective, there was a great Palestinian doctor who worked in both Gaza and Israel, and he wrote a book, Dr. Abbas was his name, on I Will Not Hate. And the programming that it takes not to grow up in a place of lack, scarcity, and hate, where you have been conditioned, where you have been deprived of dignity, of deprived of human rights. And it's an incredibly powerful thing to rewire. And it was one of the largest experiences that I have seen in other contexts as well, in the humanitarian sector in West and East Africa, where people have experienced the extreme of dominance and control exercised by other individuals on the basis of whether it be ethnic cleansing, fighting for resources, and the ability, despite extreme suffering, to still experience love and joy, and to still love, and be happy, is just incredibly powerful. The mind is incredibly powerful, and that's why I see that connection over dominance, from a flourishing of the human condition to enable people to thrive, is just so, so critical. And so to be part of that movement, is just a gift to be part of, and a gift to the world.
Mm. And after what you were just saying, it takes a very special type of human to really, sit in love and sit in that sovereignty of self and making a decision not to hate, but to love and see the other person's worldview. And I feel this is something that is actually not that easy. While it maybe can be that easy, I'm not sure. I don't know. And this is definitely a situation that I honestly can't relate to, because I haven't been in a situation like this. I don't know what it's like to go through an airport, for example, and be strip searched and so on and so forth. So yeah, I actually think I really want to read this book, because it does take a very special human. And I like to think I do come from a place of love all the time. And I have not been in a situation where I really have to dig that deep to do that.
100%. I think there's, in a very privileged life, where we might suffer some inconveniences, or and also some pretty explosive interpersonal relationships, whether that is in the workplace or at home. It is a whole next level of threat to self and ego within a situation of war, genocide, or even natural disaster, where an earthquake or cyclone, where everything physical that you own might be destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I would like to talk to you about the fact that many leaders focus on results and outcomes. And again, we're coming back to the connection and humanity. So, how do you balance commercial imperatives and leading with heart?
I think it's the $1 million question, literally for every business. And I, I results are incredibly important. Within every organization, we have a range of different audiences whose expectations we need to meet. I firmly believe, and in my experience, I have seen, when you invest in relationships and when you invest in people, those results come. That alignment that you create with people, with a shared vision, with an understanding of how to get there, and with grounded in the values, means that you're all sort of pedaling faster towards the same outcome. And often I find that amplifies results. So in the financial turnaround that I led in the last 5 years, we increased our profit sevenfold, and we doubled our workforce, we doubled our revenue, we invested in experts to help us build strategy, to remodel our business model, our operating model. If I think about the book Atomic Habits, like every little atomic thing, big thing that we could shift and transform
Mm.
to make that leap, we tackled it. And a huge part of that was working and building both internally and externally with relationships to bring everyone, some kicking and screaming by the hair along that path, but most willingly, so which
Yeah.
was nice. So I really, again, it's that what we think is a mutual contradiction, but actually what mutually emerge together is profit and purpose that can be held in the same hand or the same two hands and palm. And a big part of that, if I think about, I sort of getting into symbology a little bit, and we think about Western leadership as a pyramid. When you invert that, and you create abundance. And if you think of that symbol, it's a whole range of different symbols, from feminine creation to holding the world to abundance. And I think that's where you can hold the collective and you can see that purpose and results drive together, and fit in a cup that can overflow. So it but it doesn't come without hard work. And when I stepped into the role 6 years ago, I remember thinking, as a publicly listed American owned company, I was terrified of the finances and what the impact of not meeting our financial results would be. And I thought, oh, but people, I've got people, I can do people well. But very quickly learnt that spreadsheets with dollar signs in it was a lot easier to manage than the beautiful complexity and diversity of humans. So, that is where we need to focus, and by building and growing people and helping them grow, that's where we start to see those results really multiply exponentially. And that might sound all like hyperbole, but it's really true. I think the counter to that is where you see people that are unwilling to change, that have that immunity to change, that perhaps are stuck in that space of fear, and don't necessarily want to try new or different ways. That's when you don't see results come. And so I think from a sovereign leadership perspective, it's about providing space for people to willingly grow and thrive, uh, but not at the not in what's the word? It's not investing, but recognizing where you are hoping or placing your bet on people's potential rather than who they show you they are. And I think that's the really key differentiator. And I am a huge advocate of coaching for everybody. Everybody's got trauma. Everyone needs to do the inner work, the self work, work through your trauma, work through your communication style, and then we can all show up with a growth mindset and move forward together if we're all willing to make those small atomic changes in our habits.
Yeah. And I love that you brought that up as well. Like, yes, we all have trauma to grow through and go through and grow through. And I think that's where the key factor is, and where it comes back to every person is different. Every every view of heaven is different. And because we as humans are all so different. And what I really liked what you said there is help them grow. I think what a lot of businesses don't do well, especially during the interview process or the onboarding process, is okay. We as a company actually know what our values are. They're not just pretty words on the wall. We know what they are. We live by them. We embody them because they're also part of who we are. They're part of our own values. And as part of that, when we interview accordingly, we already know that these people will actually also fit into our value system, not only based on skills or anything else that we like a particular background in a particular company or things like that. and helping them grow for me is part of giving them a purpose. Every person in this world, I believe, wants to have a purpose. So giving them a purpose gives them room to grow already. So giving them guidance on how they fit into the bigger picture as the piece of the puzzle, I think that's so important and what so many companies don't do well.
Absolutely. I think and I've been reflecting a lot on recruitment processes at the
Mm.
moment, and that values alignment between employees and companies and leaders. And I've, and I don't know the legalities around this from a hiring perspective, but one of the things I think is really interesting is like in a one-to-one interview, you can say, so tell me about your values and how have you expressed them in your leadership, or, there's some of those sort of standard questions, but trying to unpack that and see the values alignment.
Mm.
And we check references, and I think we all know that referees generally, we're going to pick someone who's going to give us a positive reference. So really yes, it might be great and it's all true. That's wonderful. How much weight do we give that though? I'm much more interested in understanding who are the five closest people around you. What are their values? What do they stand for? How does that influence you and your values? Because I do truly believe we're the sum of the five closest influences around us, and that influences who we go home to, and what that home environment looks like, and whether we're thriving in that home environment, and whether we can then turn up as the fullest expression of ourselves in the workplace. And we all bring stresses, from home, from kids, from finances, from caring responsibilities for parents. And it's how they all play out with how we're then able to acknowledge that and turn up on any given day, and lean into our job as well, and to express, okay, maybe I'm not doing so great today, or maybe this is sort of a longer pattern of where I'm not thriving. And I need to look at what those different well-being elements are and create time for myself. um, I think there is also, if I think about your reference to purpose, and everyone needs a purpose, absolutely. In the development and humanitarian sector, we've got oodles of purpose coming out our ears in terms of, it bleeds from us all. And so that bit's actually straightforward. I'll put that in
Yeah.
inverted commas, in terms of really everyone comes to the sector with a deep uh, commitment and belief that they are creating a better world, and that they are contributing to alleviating poverty or suffering. I think sometimes, again, because of the beautiful diversity of humans, the way that is expressed may not always be in full alignment with what we think we're achieving. And again, that sort of comes down to a balance of dominance versus connection, and being able to, um, you know, historically jet into a situation where you're not from there, and impose sort of what you think the assessment of what is needed. And oftentimes something different might also be needed, or a different way of being able to do that. And one of the things I love, and that I have wrestled with over 2 decades in the sector from that sense of purpose, is there is this stereotype, particularly in the humanitarian sector, of people are either misfits, mercenaries, or missionaries. And I see it, it's really not very flattering. And I see this everywhere I go, and I have wrestled with, well, which one am I? Am I a misfit and I don't fit in, back in Australia or in the Western world, or um, and sometimes, and you see misfits of all different kinds,
Hmm.
and sometimes that's true. I've had one of the best compliments I've had is a colleague said to me, "You're the whitest Fijian I have ever seen," and
I would consider that a
but
compliment too.
that's great, thanks. But sort of that you've honoured their culture, you've honoured their language, their social structures and their society, and honoured their wishes, and that is really important in terms of the expression of purpose into a community that may thrive again in the future, and supporting their resilience and their aspiration and ambition for how that looks.
Yeah, that's actually the key here, right? So purpose, what is the definition of purpose in each individual circumstance, right? So if I want to go somewhere, do some humanitarian work, my purpose is to support them in a way that still allows them to be them and, express their culture, express their way of living. So how can I combine what I want to do as my purpose with their way of living and respecting culture, traditions, and so on and so forth? I think that's where we have to be really careful on how we define the word purpose, which comes back to
Mm.
communication again and being very specific on what we talk about.
Absolutely. And we've seen many, many times where well-intentioned people have a purpose, and their purpose is, oh, I see there's been this disaster, an earthquake. I'm going to send a whole lot of stuff, and whether that be clothes or canned goods or books. And uh, I've seen many instances where receiving or recipient countries have said, please stop sending these things, that they're actually not useful. Um, and there's a book, I've never got my hands on it, but it's called the White Dead Man's Market, something to that effect. And it is about this secondhand clothing market of people from the Western world sending their secondhand clothing to Africa or other parts of Asia, and these markets where they're sold. And it sort of chronicles the story of this individual who thought that they all belonged to people who had died or passed away, and that's how they got sent. They didn't realize that people sent that with intention and purpose.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, again, it comes back to that communication piece, and that sort of shared global understanding, which is really difficult, right? So particularly, I think one of my other pastimes when I have time is I'm fascinated by language, and so
Yeah.
if you haven't picked that already, in terms of that communication and nuance and the power of language, and I think often. Um, Again, great book, Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. Like when we talk about emotions in English, we generally use three terms: happy, angry, sad. And there is such a deeper, broader continuum and nuance of emotion that I find often we can't express in English, but that you find beautifully in other languages. English has got 8 million words, Arabic has got 12 million words, you know, Mongol has 30 different ways to describe the color white, white snow, white cloud. And I
Yeah.
just think that offers so much um, deeper meaning and ability to interpret perhaps intention in communication.
Yeah. And while you're talking about that, I'm just thinking about all the words that we start to butcher and shortcut and ruining a language. And yes,
Right?
I very often use the etymology of words as well. So when I'm really, really curious on something where it comes from, I look at the etymology and do a bit of deep diving in which other ways the words have been used in the past and where they came from. So I think language is super, super fascinating and being very specific in your communication. And yeah, I think it's so important.
Absolutely. And like picking up on that thread of looking at the origin of words and things, I had a First Nations elder once say to me, why are you saying good morning? Like if you actually follow the root of that salutation back, it was about grief and mourning. Are you having a good grieving period? Um, which is not a particularly joyful way to greet someone in the morning, really, when sort of we think that it's a societal politeness.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's why I was trying to say good day. Who knows?
Right? Possibly, possibly.
So I'm really curious. Going back again to leading with compassion, have you ever had moments where leading with compassion felt like the harder choice? And how did you navigate that?
Hmm. I don't think I have ever been faced yet with that situation where I felt like exercising compassion was the harder choice. And I think part of that is because when I exercise restraint, or when I'm sort of able to, when I'm confronted with a situation and able to take a breath and think about, well, what's the outcome that we want to achieve here? Do I need to be right, or do I want to preserve a relationship, or do I want to try and get us both to a point of agreement, even if that's agreeing to disagree? And I think part of it is weighing up the perceived threat um, of the adverse outcome or of the individual. And I think, particularly, again, given some of the situations of dominance that I have found myself in, um, they're sort of the litmus test for, does this person in front of me have a gun? No. Does the person are they holding it to me? No. Are there rockets landing around me? No. So, the simple calm. uh, Are they a terrorist yelling at me? No. We're safe. We're okay. Yes, this individual might be yelling, but they're, on the other side of the world in North America, yelling at me through their laptop. It's fine. I'm okay. My life is not in danger. Maybe my ego's a little bruised, but I can come back from that. So, I think it really has been um, weighing up and being able to relativize the situation, and then go, compassion is always the way. And again, that doesn't come at the expense of boundaries. And so maybe the boundary is sometimes not giving a response,
Mm.
or it's asking a question back to challenge uh, a belief that you don't agree with. But I think it's always about trying to hold that compassion.
Yeah, I agree. I was recently at a networking event, and the first person spoke, introduced herself, and talked about what she did, and then we ran her around the table. And the first person kept interrupting each person and adding her point of view onto it, and um, pretty much added to how that person was doing things similar to that person, or how it impacted her having been in a situation like that. And she did that all without actually asking if she can add to that conversation. So everyone, of course, was meant to have their moment to talk about themselves. However, she was the only one that added every single time. And then it came to me, and I talked about, of course, myself and what I do and things like that. I was the only person where she asked for permission to say something, which was very interesting.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Um, and that's where I had my moment of, this can go any way, shape, or form. This person had so little self awareness and
Mhm.
clearly had a trauma around, not being heard, seen, valued, things like that. And I could have chosen to say, yes, I do mind, because you already sort of interjected everyone else. And I just chose to just let it go and let her have her thing, um, because I just felt it wasn't the right time, place, all of the above to do that. And um, did I really want to say, look, no, it's my turn, you already interrupted everyone else? I really, really wanted to do that. And then I was like, no, it's just not worth it. So I went down the compassion way. And yes, in how many situations do people just go into a fight rather than just saying, you know what, it's actually not worth it. It's not going to matter in 5 minutes. It's not going to matter in 5 weeks, months. just let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really powerful example. I love that, and that you were able to create that space for her. And I think it's often where I've seen those situations where, yeah, again, when you exercise that restraint and take that step back and go, what's it really that's driving this response from the individual? And without, I think there is also a balance between overthinking things and sort of running off down a path of assumptions versus um, using that experience and intuition and knowledge and relationship of and
Mm,
with the person to be able to place the response perhaps on any given day. Um, that being said, one of the other things that I have experienced over time, and I was talking a little bit about in my early career, I worked as an operating theatre nurse and high performing but highly stressful environments.
mm,
And certainly where stress is not well regulated, but when things go wrong, individuals can start yelling, and that does become really stressful. And I think unless there is that level of coming back to self-awareness and emotional regulation, there's often not a circuit breaker or an off switch when people are yelling like that, when they're deeply escalated. And I often think in those moments doesn't matter what I say. I can be really calm. I can yell back. I can stand there and say, I'm a banana. And it, or something else really ridiculous. And it actually will all have the same response back. And so I think it's in those moments where holding that compassion, making sure
mm.
you're safe, removing yourself from that situation if you can,
Yeah.
but understanding that that's coming from a place of deep stress and trauma
Yeah.
for the individual as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying, it doesn't matter what your response is, you can yell back. That will escalate even further. You can say absolutely nothing, which can also drive that person crazy because maybe they feel like you're actually not paying attention to them. And all they
Yeah.
want to do is express themselves and don't know how to. Or yes, you can say something like "I'm a banana," and they get agitated even more, or they start laughing. I mean, you just never know. But yes, not most of the time, removing yourself from a situation is probably the best option.
Yes.
So, with that said, how can leaders begin to notice where they're unconsciously leading from dominance and shift that
Mm.
into leading from connection?
So it absolutely comes back to the self awareness piece.
Mm,
I do feel, however, that excelling in business is also like excelling in sport or excelling in other domains of life. And again, we don't do that in isolation from others. We do that with a support network. And so to really shift to identify where those unconscious blind spots or areas of dominance might be. Yes, we need the self awareness. Yes, we need to be open to the feedback and to be able to use inner and external resources to help us move along.
mm,
We do, in terms of those external resources, it is about, yes, those 5 people who are closest to us who can offer those different perspectives. But two things. One of the most powerful tips that a friend once shared with me. He's like, I have 5 mentors. And I think, and I was like, 5, wow, God, I'm struggling to find one at the time, sort of 15 years ago. And, but I was like, that makes so much sense because we get different things from different people. Again, it's that
mm,
different perspective, that different itulangi. People will have a different take on it. And so, and at different times in our lives, we need different things. And maybe those mentors are deeply, there's a very strong, deep, long running relationship there. But maybe they're just someone that comes in for a season and offers some higher level advice. But I think having those different mentors is really important within your life, whether they're formal or informal. And that then leads me to is that support network. If I look at the top athletes in the world, they have a nutritionist, a psychologist, a coach, they might do dance on top of that, or they have this support network around them that helps them excel in all different facets of what it takes to lead and to be a great athlete. And I think of business as in the same way. We need energy from physical exercise. We need great nutrition. We need good sleep. We need good coaches to help us develop our mind and different strategies and frameworks to help along that growth trajectory. And I'm a huge advocate, as I said before, for business coaches, for personal coaches, psychologists. I think you need them all.
Yeah, I agree. And like I have coaches on a regular basis, and people say, "Oh, but you're a coach yourself. What do you need a coach for?" And I'm like, "Well, I still have my own blind spots. I still have areas where I need support with, and having someone to bounce that off, to keep me accountable as well, that's all really, really important." So, on that note, you have said that to lead others, we must first lead ourselves. What does that look like for you in daily life?
Such a good question. And I think that shifts over time as well, definitely. So sport has always been a really big part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I did competitive gymnastics as a teenager and retired at 22. And keeping physically active has always been a significant part of maintaining my mental health. And so that has morphed over time from running to being at the gym to, again, also depending on the environment. And I've lived in some fairly high risk, high security environments where you can't just go for a walk or a run on the street. You need security detail to drive you to a gated compound or gym. And so you need to be able to make these adaptations within that environment to still maintain your wellness. Something I have rediscovered in the last, I think, 4 years. And so I had talked about this initially with one of my business coaches about 6 or 7 years ago. And being a reforming perfectionist, um, she, constant work in progress, constant work in progress. Um, she challenged me to do something that really scares you, that you know you're not going to be good at, that you're going to be terrible at, but that you need to lean in heavily to that. So I have been doing singing lessons for the last 4 years. I go once a week for half an hour and it's beautifully creative. I love my vocal coach. She's a ball of energy. It's great to just have someone creative outside of your sort of normal network. And to really, singing is pretty confronting when it's just you and one other person and your voice. And and the extension of that has been I'm also a reforming coffee drinker, where 4 or 5 coffees a day doesn't do much for your vocal cords in terms of hydration. So trying to drink more water as part of that journey as well. And recently I have started journaling. So I've had, I don't know why it's taken me so long. Well, I do know why, just one of those blockers, but I love writing, love words, but for whatever reason, I've been like, no, don't want to journal, don't want to journal. And over the last month, I have started doing that every day and deeply powerful just to get everything out of your head onto paper, speak it into truth. Uh, it's been a really lovely habit to have developed. So yeah, there's some of the ways that that I sort of find that balance and focus on self, as well as trying to lean in with not trying, but do presence and joy, having 2 children, and spending 3 hours on a Friday night at volleyball practice and a 6:30 a.m. on a Monday driving them to sport. So amongst all of the messy chaos that is family life, finding that time for myself for the gym, journaling, sometimes some meditation. Yeah,
Yeah. And I can relate to the journaling part. I used to journal a lot a few years ago, and then I just stopped for whatever reason. I don't even know why I stopped, and I'm actually at the moment struggling to get back into it. I know I want to do it because I know what the benefits of it is, and I've enjoyed it while I was doing it. So I still get to uncover what that little barrier is. And we have to talk offline about the singing because, well, no one here really knows. I actually love to sing, so I do sing a lot, and I want to actually take singing lessons again. So we have to have a conversation about that offline.
Amazing. We'll connect that. Fantastic. Voice House, based on Gilly Street.
All right, yeah. I love
They
singing.
also do, and I haven't joined it yet, but it is my intention to join it, a drop-in choir on a Friday night. And so I think that ability to harmonize and be with others, and some nights they might have five, some nights they might have 10, I think is a really beautiful extension of that.
All right, definitely a conversation offline is required.
Love it, love it.
So bringing it back on track, we briefly talked about it earlier in regards to onboarding. So onboarding is often, in my opinion, something that is overlooked.
Mm.
And you, as much as me, we both know it is very important. So what do you believe, what role do you believe it plays in shaping culture and connection?
Mm. I think it is fundamentally so critical to shaping culture and
Mm,
to helping build or cement that sense of belonging for staff coming to an organization. And I have seen, I feel, so many different permutations of that, both in terms of leading organizations and both in terms of receiving onboarding. And from the excitement of we want to share absolutely everything and we want you to meet absolutely everyone and understand every department, where it is this information overload that just is too overwhelming and sort of nothing gets absorbed,
mm,
to no onboarding, and it's people are sort of flailing around and finding their own way, and neither of those extremes are effective. And so I think I'm still finding, where is that sweet spot of knowing it is so critical? How do you stage it to help uh, ensure that information that's really important gets presented and taken up at the right time to help people feel that they belong and help them to be effective in their new role?
mm.
And open to all and any ideas. I think it is a work in progress. And I was actually talking to my business coach earlier this morning about this very thing. The conversation we were having is how do you build that from the outset? So you've got a vision, you're starting up a company. What might that look like in terms of how do you get this right? How do you build it? Noting that it will evolve and need to evolve over time. And I look at things like the McDonald's model is very lauded in terms of turning teenagers into very predictable employees that deliver quality and quantity at the same quality, irrespective of space. And so, what has it been about their model that has been able to do that? Maybe it's not a like for like comparison, but there's certainly some things to learn there about how do we make this a really effective process. I'm still searching for those answers. And I think about my own experiences of being onboarded, and again, they have been really variable. And I would say, particularly when you start moving into leadership roles, there is less and less onboarding that happens. Uh, you're sort of already expected to understand the technical work, and then you already have the leadership or managerial skills. And so it really is a here you go, sink or swim kind of environment. And I always remember one of my first budget lessons when I started managing a health department in a hospital, public hospital, government funded. My manager said to me, "Oh, we're $1 million over budget. That's great. That means we'll get more money next year." And I remember thinking, hang on a minute, that that can't be it. Like it's got to be a bit more of a deeper analysis than that. But I think often leaders are not prepared by organizations or by other leaders to step into that role. And I think that's
Mm.
an element of onboarding as well.
Yeah. And myself as well, I have been in so many onboarding situations. Most of them have not been great, where it was like, here's your desk, here's your computer, here are your passwords. Your emails may or may not work. If they don't, call IT, and then figuring out what IT's number is, and all those sort of things. And yes, in leadership roles, we have certain experiences. Yes, in leadership roles, we have done XYZ in the past. Are we in a new company? Absolutely, we are. So, still, having at least that courtesy to be shown around, introduced to people, knowing who to speak to in what situation. Yes, can we do it ourselves? Of course. Will it help the connection and the culture component to do it? Absolutely, it will. So, yeah, in terms of the onboarding, I feel there's so much that has to improve overall in the world. And yes, McDonald's does have a great model. And I don't know enough about it. However, is it too much procedure and not enough human in it? Like
Yes,
at the
yes,
moment, I'm thinking, yes, it's very procedure driven. Again, I don't know much about it. I will be open and honest about that. And at the moment, it seems to me to be very procedure driven rather than human driven. So
human
how
driven.
can we combine that?
Yes, absolutely. There's got to be a sweet spot somewhere in the middle there where you've brought procedure and then sort of that full uh, human volition and choice somewhere into the middle. And I say that as I think about, in some senses, it was onboarding, but one of my experience is landing in a new country into a new role. And I had had very detailed briefings at a number of different levels before I landed in country. But the last piece of advice or guidance that I had been given before I flew out of Paris to West Africa was, here's $2 to put in your pocket. If no one's there to pick you up, take a taxi. And I was like, I was like, okay, sure. I was 24. 24, and I landed in Freetown in Sierra Leone at like 7 o'clock at night. It was pitch black. $2 in my pocket, my t-shirt with the logo emblazoned on it. They couldn't miss me. No one was there to pick me up. And it was like those, I used to love those books, Choose Your Own Adventure. As a kid, it was really like that. It was like, okay, as a 24-year-old blonde
Hmm.
girl, do I take the $2 in my pocket and take a taxi to where I need to go? Mind you, the address I had in my head was also wrong. It was like a town 7 hours away. So I would not have been able to give the taxi driver the right address anyway. Or do I turn the page, and there was a group of Irish concreters who had just flown in who offered to give me a lift. I was like, who do I pick? What's the risk assessment here? And
I would go with the Irish concreters, to be honest.
I picked the Irish concreters, and bless them, they made sure I got there safely. But they must have been thinking, my God, this girl has no idea like what she has flown into. Naivety. But I think about those sliding door moments
Yeah.
when you make those risk assessments, and I think about, could I have been given different advice? Or could the person who was meant to pick me up have actually been there on time and was not drinking at the bar across the road? So missed my flight.
Oh. I could talk to you for hours. And in a way, I feel we've only really scratched the surface of this conversation. So I'm officially inviting you to come back at one point. But before I let
Amazing.
you go, I do have a couple more things that I want to touch on. So when you look at the world's defining challenges right now, what role do you believe leaders must play in reshaping systems?
Mm, We are experiencing the collapse of systems from polycrisis to climate. There are incredible challenges that we're facing in this century. And my very strongly held view is the way that leaders show up, the way we work with our people, colleagues, peers, loved ones to face those defining challenges in a way that connects us and is for the better of the collective is really critical for us all to come through on the other side of that, as unscathed as we can. So I think it is really, the privilege of leading people is to have their best interests and the collective best interest of people, planet, and communities. And so leaders need to be moving through with connection rather than dominance so that the collective can flourish.
Yeah, great. And what would you say to a leader who wants to lead with heart and courage and really take the principle of, power and connection, or connection over power, to say that a lot better, but feels afraid of challenging the status quo? What would you say to that leader?
Mm, I would say embrace the fear and do it anyway,
Mm,
because it is about standing in your truth. And so I think that is the most important thing. To lead with heart is about being anchored in your truth.
mm,
And when and only when we do that is when we can shake the room and shake that space.
yeah,
And we have to do that without the fear of being seen, without the fear of being visible, and without that fear of rejection, because there are going to be haters. There are going to be those that disagree, that undermine, and you have to do it anyway. And I think that's also something that I am learning and seeing a lot of in the world is just go and do it anyway. Because even if you don't do the thing, there's going to be haters. So do the thing.
yeah. I agree. I so agree. And sometimes I am telling myself that a lot as well. So and one final question before I'll leave the floor to you again to add anything that we maybe haven't talked about that you really want to share. What does legacy mean to you as a leader?
Mm. So, legacy to me is the example where 3 to 5 years after I left Gaza, so I worked in Gaza in 2010 at Nasser Hospital near the Rafah crossing border, and we were fortifying the hospital for the next intifada, the next war. And 3 to 5 years after that, a colleague messaged me and said, "We are still using the systems that you put in place 5 years ago." And so for me, that's legacy. It's for when you build something, when you build systems, when you build people, and you can see them still sitting and anchored in their truth and delivering what they were designed to deliver. And wish I could say thriving, but Nasser Hospital was one of the last standing hospitals in Gaza through this genocide, operating without anaesthetic, but still standing. And so that is legacy. That's been a small contribution to alleviating suffering and pain in a terrible situation. And so for me, yeah, legacy is building something that endures.
Yeah. And that just gave me shivers you wouldn't believe. Yeah, that's beautiful. Amy, is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't talked about? Anything that you really feel the listeners need to hear right now before you come back for another round?
Um, Two things. So I would just like to thank you so much for the invitation to join you. It's been the privilege to have the conversation. It's been exciting to hear your thinking and your experience and to share in that. And secondly, I would leave everyone with the concept of aloha. It is, you know, the thread, the golden thread that binds us, that creates that beautiful, that weaves all of our experiences into existence. It centers, it becomes human centered, it centers all of us, and lean into it.
Beautifully said. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Your episode is coming out really, really soon because I really want the people to hear all about it. So, and yeah, let's have a chat offline on when you're coming back and we can talk a little bit more. And yeah, thank you again for your time. I know it's really, really valuable. So, thank you for being here and being my guest.
Amazing. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Me too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Beyond the Boardroom. I'm truly grateful to have you here. So if today's conversation resonated with you, I'd love for you to follow the show, leave a review, or share it with someone who'd find it valuable. Your support helps us spread the message of purposeful, connected leadership even further. So until next time, take care, stay curious, and lead with heart.